Hello and welcome. We're so happy you're here. Thank you for joining us tonight. So you are here for our webinar called Not All IEP Goals Are Created Equal. I'm Helene Linsky.
And I'm Sarah Baum.
So I have been to many IEP meetings as a parent.
And I have led many IEP meetings.
So we know how daunting, my gosh, how daunting and overwhelming the process can be. And if we can help clarify anything about that process tonight, then we've accomplished our goal.
Absolutely.
So just an FYI, we're planning on holding more of these free educational webinars in the future. And at the end of the presentation, we will put a link in the chat box for a brief survey. I really mean brief. It's only about, I don't know, 7 or 8 questions. We'll be raffling off a $50 Amazon gift card.
Ooh.
I mean, who doesn't love Amazon, right? And we will email the winner. There'll be one lucky winner. So the brief survey will ask you what other topics you may want us to include in the future. And it will also ask for your email address so we can contact and inform you directly of our upcoming workshops. If you don't want to fill out the survey because maybe you don't really like Amazon, I don't know, you can just leave your email in the chat box and we'll be sure to include you on our mailers in the future for our upcoming webinars. But today, what we're talking about are IEP goals, which is just one part of the process, but we think it's one of the most important processes or one of the most important points. Also, you may have some questions during the webinar, and in order for us to maximize our time and have the best use of our time, we're asking if you do have any questions, if you can write them in the chat box, and after the presentation, we will try to address all of those questions. If we don't get to address your questions, please feel free to email us, call us, reach out via our website. And we're going to have all of our contact information on the last slide of the presentation.
All right. So once again, I'm Sarah Baum. I wanted to provide just a little bit of background about myself. So first and foremost, I am the mom of a 13-year-old son. His name is Gavin, and he's in the 8th grade. His new obsession is basketball, and I am just trying to keep up. And just like any other parent, I want the best educational experience for him. I applaud you all for being here because obviously you want the same outcome for your child. Now, moving on to my professional experience, I had the opportunity to be a resource specialist in public elementary schools in Orange County for 8 years. I hold a bachelor's degree in child development and a master's degree in special education. As a resource specialist, I was a case manager, which meant I was in charge of my students' IEPs. I typically had anywhere from 30 to 40 students on my caseload during the course of a normal school year, which meant that I spoke, lived, and breathed IEPs.
Didn't you dream it as well?
Basically, dreamed it too,
Yeah.
basically 24/7. I wrote my students' IEPs, led many IEP meetings, collaborated with service providers, with teachers and parents, and of course, I taught my students, all of whom had their unique learning needs. I loved tailoring instruction and interventions for each of my students, watching them make progress and celebrating their successes. I found my job to be incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. One of my favorite parts of my role was working with my families and helping them understand the confusing IEP process. I loved educating them on their rights and certain things that they could ask for. The more that I supported my families, the more I realized that there just isn't enough information or resources out there to help them be involved participants in their child's education. And that's how our company, Empower You Advocacy, was formed.
So this is Helene again, and I am also a mother. I have 2 adult sons, and I stayed home with my children while they were growing up. My younger son was placed on an IEP at the age of 3. For speech and language impairment, he also received occupational therapy or OT therapy. And when he was in the 3rd grade, he was also identified as having a very severe math disability. So he stayed on the IEP till the end of high school. So I have the personal experience of being a mom, trying to navigate the special education process and trying to understand his IEP. I've been in your shoes, and believe me, I've made mistakes along the way, but I did learn how to advocate for him. And today, he's now a college student, doing exceptionally well and studying to be a professor of history. Now, onto my professional experience. I hold a bachelor's degree in speech pathology and audiology. While my sons were in high school, I wanted to make an impact by working with students in special populations. So I became a paraprofessional, and I did it at the resource program at an elementary school, and that's where I met Sarah. I work with students on Sarah's caseload and was trained on teaching them using evidence-based interventions. So Sarah and I, as long as what I consider, we were the dream team.
Absolutely.
We got to help so many students make progress. It was above and beyond rewarding. However, we became very disillusioned when we realized that not every child on Sarah's caseload was getting an equal quality education. And a lot of that had to do with parent knowledge of the special education process.
So we both obviously come from working in the school setting. And so I just want to be very clear. The members of the IEP team, IEP teams at schools are by and large doing the absolute best with what they have. People go into education because they have a heart to help children. However, the reality is that there are systemic issues with public education. There are simply too many students with unique learning needs and not enough staff or resources to provide each child with what he or she needs. Often, it was our experience that it was the parents that had an advocate, or sometimes in extreme cases, an attorney who got the best education for their child. And it made us realize that there is such a need for this, to educate parents on this process. The more you know, the better off your child is going to be. Once again, the name of our company is Empower You Advocacy. We are non-attorney special education advocates, and it is our mission to equip parents with knowledge and resources about the special education process. Our end goal for our families is to educate them to the point where they are confident to advocate for their own child.
Well, now let's get to the meat of our presentation. So, IEP goals. Specific and measurable IEP goals are the roadmap for your child's success in school. So if our ultimate goal is for your child to be as successful as possible in school, then the way we determine that success is with their goals. This is how we know if interventions are working for your child and whether they're making progress. That's why we wanted to deliver this webinar, because the goals are so important for an effective IEP. By the end of this webinar, we want you to have a better understanding of what to look for in your own child's IEP goals, and if there are any issues, what you can do to address those issues.
Absolutely. So this next slide shows what we're going to be covering this evening. We're going to be starting with a description of what present levels are. And you're probably going to get tired of hearing us say this, but present levels are the foundation for the entire IEP.
The star of the show.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of acronyms. If you've been in special education for any length of time, you'll know that there are just so many acronyms. A couple of those are PLOP, and the second one I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, but those are just two acronyms that you might see, and they just both mean present levels. And then after we go over present levels, we're going to be talking about SMART goals. SMART is another acronym, and the letters stand for different things that we look for in IEP goals to make sure they are as effective as possible, to make sure that your child is making progress in their education. And then lastly, if there's issues with the goals or if there's issues related to the goals, we want to bring up some situations that may occur and then what you can do to address those issues. So that'll be the final part of our presentation.
So we're looking at present levels. Simply put, IEP present levels is where your child is now. Their goal is where we want them to be. So I don't know about you, but I clearly remember when the school team told me that my son was not at grade level. My heart sunk, and it was just extremely hard to hear. And my first thought was, how do I get him to catch up? And what I didn't know then, but I do know now, is that it all starts with the goals. We think about the child's current skill level, which is their present level, and we compare that against their same grade peers. How do we bridge that gap? That's the whole purpose of an IEP goal, to get them closer to grade level content.
I mean, in this visual, Helene just summed it up beautifully. Shows 3 important IEP steps. So again, present levels, what are we starting with? What do their skill levels look like right now? And then we compare their performance right now against grade level standards in order to address that gap. That's how IEP goals are created, to get them closer to that grade level standard and expectation. And then from the goals, we determine, or the school staff determine, about how much time is it going to take to work on those goals. That's how service minutes, or sometimes referred to as specially designed instruction, that's how that part of the IEP is developed. So once again, present levels are the foundation of your child's IEP. They are truly the star of the show.
We're going to say that a lot.
So let's just say that I am reading your child's IEP and I'm looking at the present levels page. I need this part of the IEP to be really unique to your child. It's great if it shows their interests as well. So let's say that your child is really into building with Legos, he loves dinosaurs, he loves playing with Play-Doh. I love it when that kind of information is in there, because there's several reasons for that. These details can give the school team ideas of ways that they can incorporate it in your child's learning, how they can use it as incentives, and it really just gives them a chance to really connect with your child as a person.
Definitely.
What else are we looking at when we're looking at present levels? Well, we're looking at academic achievement and we're looking at functional performance. So just to break down academic achievement a little bit further, that's looking at your reading, writing, and math. And again, I'd like to see really specific information here. I like to hear information about strengths and challenges. So instead of saying Juan is good at math, I would like to see first a description of a strength that Juan has in math. So for example, a strength for Juan is his ability to solve multiplication and division equations. And then I also want to see an area of challenge if he does have an area of challenge in math. So for example, an area of challenge for Juan is solving 2-step word problems. Guess what? That gives the team some really great information that they can then write a goal for to help Juan make progress with that skill. Then we look at functional performance. So we also want to see strengths and challenges for other areas, not just for academics. So for example, things like fine motor skills, speech and language skills, social emotional functioning, and adaptive skills. And a couple of examples of adaptive skills might be things like self-care skills or independent living skills. So basically anything that impacts your child's education needs to be reflected on the present levels page.
And as a parent, I know your child's IEP is overwhelming and contains a lot of information and a lot of jargon. But I really, really encourage you to look over the present levels page of your child's IEP. Make sure the information on the present levels section matches what you see your child doing at home. Remember, you are the expert on your child. And if the team is missing important information about your child, then you really need to let them know about that. So now we're going to go on to what IEP goals should be. SMART. Here we are, another acronym, but it's an easy acronym to remember as we determine if a goal is well written or not. So we want to look that it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic and relevant, and timely. I'm going to start with S, specific. What specific skill do you want to improve? For example, it's not enough to say, we want Jimmy to improve in his reading. We need to look at the specific skill with reading that we want him to improve on. So, for example, maybe he can sound out words just fine and he can read single words on a list. But when you give him a grade level passage, he reads each word really slowly. So in this case, you'd want a goal for reading fluency, which is how fast he reads. This is a very specific reading skill.
Absolutely. And then we have our M, which stands for measurable. So what makes an IEP goal measurable? I'll tell you, it drives me crazy when I see goals that say based on teacher observation.
Her pet peeve.
That is very subjective. If your child's teacher says, for example, you know, Brian did great on his math assignment yesterday, so I think he's making really great progress on his math IEP goal. Well, it's nice to know that he did well yesterday, but that doesn't give me anything concrete. It was just a one-time observation. As a good rule of thumb, when we're talking about measurable, we're talking about numbers.
Right.
I want to see numbers that we can take data on. So, for example, real world example, think about when you're measuring ingredients when you're baking something. If you want your cake to turn out well, you need to be very precise with those numbers on your measuring cup. You don't just eyeball it. It's the same concept for IEP goals. So then if we go back to our previous example of Brian's math goal, a better way to measure the goal is to say he will solve equations with 80% accuracy. Again, we're using numbers so that we can objectively track how well your child is doing on the goal.
So now we're on A for attainable. We want the goal to be challenging, but also something the student can achieve. So we actually saw an IEP like this where there was a student who was currently reading and understanding books at a kindergarten level. And his IEP goal was to read and understand books at his current grade, which was a 4th grade level.
Huge gap.
So, I mean, that blows my mind because if we look at that again, his present reading is at kindergarten level, reading and understanding, and his goal is at a 4th grade level. That is 4 grades higher.
In one year of time that he's been expected.
Exactly. So for a rule of thumb, we can generally expect that a student will make 1 year's worth of progress in a year's time. We want to set up our children for success, and you know your child best. So if your child has a goal that's so lofty that it doesn't seem like he or she will be able to reach that goal, you may want to question it.
And then we have our R, which stands for realistic and relevant. So at this point, we want to back up a bit and we want to look at the big picture. So I want you right now to consider whatever age your child is right now, whether they are 3 years old, whether they are 17 years old. I want you to ask yourself, where do you want your child to be by the end of their school career? We all have hopes and dreams for our children. I shared with you before that my own son is 13. So I am considering right now what I want him to know and the skills that I want him to have to be an independent man and a contributing member of society. So I know this can be hard or overwhelming to think about when your child is young, but it is an essential component in guiding the IEP process.
So just consider that by the time your child is 18 or 22, their IEP will be over. And what are your goals for them at that point? Perhaps you would like them to attend a university or a community college. Your expectations for their IEP goals would be higher in this case. You would expect more academically based goals, as well as other goals to get them where we need them to be. Maybe how to organize themselves or time management, things like that. Now, perhaps college is not their thing. Maybe your goal for them is functional and independent. What does that look like? Do you want them to go straight into the workforce, or maybe volunteer, or simply be able to take care of themselves? In this case, you might have more functional IEP goals.
So I think the main takeaway from this is that every IEP goal from now until that vision that you have for them should be a stepping stone to that end result. And with each goal, you need to ask yourself, is this goal getting my child another step closer to realizing my vision for them? And something that you can even do when we're all done with this webinar is you can just take a brief moment and write down, it doesn't need to be anything long, it could be a sentence or two about what is your vision for your child at the end of their school career. And then look at your child's IEP goals and see if they align with that vision.
That stepping stone.
I would also encourage you to share that vision with your IEP, your child's IEP team, so that everybody is on the same page.
And the last letter is T for timely, and all goals need to have an end date. They're written to be worked on for 1 year. Now notice, this is a big thing that a lot of people don't realize, that we didn't say school year, because an IEP covers a calendar year. So if an IEP, just say, is written in March, it could cover until the March of the following year. So maybe your child is in 2nd grade for the first few months of the IEP, March, April, May, June. Well, then it also covers when they go back to school in August until March of their 3rd grade year. Therefore, it would cover 2 separate grade levels.
Absolutely. There's another thing to think about with timely. We want to be on the lookout for goals that are repeated year to year. So if you look back at your child's previous IEPs, the verbiage and the goals should not be the same. It should be changing. And if it is the same year to year, this indicates that your child is not making progress on their IEP goals. The goals legally, they need to get progressively more and more challenging each year. And again, that has to do with that stepping stone concept that we talked about earlier. So we just went over SMART goals. To summarize, for the S, we need to make sure that the goal is working on a specific skill. For M, we need to make sure it uses numbers, that it is measurable. For A, we need to make sure it's a goal that your child can realistically attain within a year's time. For R, we need to make sure the goal acts as a stepping stone towards your ultimate vision for them. And then lastly, make sure there's an end date and that the goal does not keep repeating over and over.
And another good rule of thumb, especially for academic goals, is that the goals should be written so clearly and so easily measurable that you should be able to track their progress on their goals at home.
All right, so now this is a fun part. We're going to see if you can spot the difference between goals that are written vaguely, vague goal versus a SMART goal. So this is for the area of decoding, and just simply put, decoding is when a student is given a word to read and they have to use phonetic strategies to be able to figure out that letter sound correspondence in order to read that word. So they're usually given a list of words. They have to read the words one at a time. So the vague goal says, given a list of grade level words, Johnny will read the words correctly by February 7th, 2024.
Now, I had just mentioned to you that the IEP goals are for a calendar year. So right
Calendar
away,
year.
I'm saying a list of grade level words. Well, what if your student is in second grade for a few months of the IEP and third grade for the other
So
part of it?
he's been working on his second grade level words. He's been doing such a great job. He's making such great progress. And then, oh no, he has to start all over. He's really only being given half of the year to work on those third grade level words. He's not being given the full IEP year. So that's something to take into consideration. That's
Definitely.
a great point. Now, looking at the SMART version of the goal, and you'll notice that these goals, the SMART goals, are quite a bit longer. Try to stick with me. I know it can be a little bit overbearing. So by February 7th, 2024, when given a list of 5 four-letter words, each with a long vowel pattern, for example, boat or maid, Johnny will use pre-taught kinetic strategies to read the words with 80% accuracy across 4 opportunities, as measured by teacher data collection. Boy, is this goal specific. I read it and I know right away, first of all, it's going to be 5 words in the list. Why is that important? Well, it might be important if, let's say, Johnny has attention issues, and by the time he's reading that 7th word, he's totally pooped out and he's not reading the words correctly anymore, not because of his reading ability, but because his attention doesn't allow for it. So I like that it specifies the number of words. It talks about the pattern of the type of words. When it says pre-taught kinetic strategies, what might that look like?
So this is used a lot in schools. So just say a child is trying to sound out the word cat. It might look like at, or a lot of times they'll do patting on their arm, at, cat.
So they're incorporating body movements in order to learn that strategy, which is a really great skill. And then I love that it's measurable. He's reading the words with 80% accuracy, and it's across 4 opportunities. So we're making sure that he's consistent with that skill. Good example of a SMART goal. Let's look at another contrast. So this one's for math. So first, looking at our vague goal. So this one says by February 7th, 2024, when given 10 addition and subtraction equations and teacher prompting, Johnny will solve equations correctly based on teacher observation. Oh, boo. We don't want this teacher observation. We want it to be more measurable than that. Too subjective. Would you mind reading the SMART version of that goal?
By February 7th, 2024, when given a mixture of 5 addition and 5 subtraction problems within 20, with and without regrouping, and given access to manipulatives and or drawings to solve, Johnny will independently find the correct sum or difference with 80% accuracy across 4 opportunities as measured by work samples and teacher data collection. So that's a pretty good goal.
So first of all, this goal is very specific. It even goes into with and without regrouping. So those are specific math skills. 5 addition, 5 subtraction. We're talking about equations within 20, not within 100, not within 1,000. So I have a better idea of what exactly Johnny is working on. I also really like that it says Johnny will independently find the correct sum or difference. Notice that in the vague goal, it says with teacher prompting. I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe if it quantified it, if it said with 1 prompt or with 2 prompt, but it just says teacher prompting. That could mean anything from the teacher tapping on Johnny's shoulder, make sure you pay attention, all the way to the teacher working on the entire goal with Johnny, and Johnny's not showing that he can do it independently. What would be an example of a manipulative?
So that could be something that they use a lot in elementary schools. It could be blocks. It could be any manipulatives that they can hold on to, whether it be pebbles or different crayons, anything that they can group together and touch to be able to solve the equation.
Absolutely. And I also love that it has 80% accuracy here. It's across 4 opportunities, and it's not measured by teacher observation. It's measured by work samples. It's measured by teacher data collection. So we're making sure that the data is very objective.
And I know before I had said we want the goal to be written so that you can track the progress at home, but we also want the goal that if you do have to move to a different school, that the new school team would be able to look at this goal and would be able to know exactly what your student or what your child is working on and how to help them make progress.
Absolutely.
So now here's the question. You have this great information on what your child's IEP goals should look like. And let's say now you're armed with all this new information and you're looking over your child's IEP goals and you're realizing that there are some issues with the way the goal is written. What do you do? Well, the first thing we would recommend is you reach out to the person that wrote the particular goal in question. So if it is an SAI, which stands for
Specialized Academic Instruction,
that goal would be written by the resource specialist. If it's a speech goal, you would reach out to the speech therapist. You can email this teacher, whoever wrote the goal, and you can say something like, I just wanted to check in with you about Daniel's reading. I'm trying to take some data on his reading goal at home, and I'm a little confused by the wording. Also, sometimes these goals will have jargon in them. So it's very common and we expect you to ask the particular teacher what that means.
Right.
Or you can simply say, I'm not sure how to measure this because I don't see a number. By approaching it this way, you're creating a dialogue with the teacher or the speech teacher or whoever wrote the goal, and you're becoming an active participant in developing your child's IEP. You can make suggestions like, can we change the fluency goal to 80 words a minute, so I really know how to measure this at home? It's totally fine. And in fact, we really encourage you to make these sort of suggestions and add your input into your child's IEP.
So here is another situation that might come up. What if
it's number 2, right?
Number 2, what if a goal is met early? This would be a good, positive situation. We like to see this type of situation, right? So as we know, goals are written for a calendar year. So what if your child meets the goal in 3 months, in 4 months? They meet the goal early. Then what do you do? So again, you as the parent need to reach out to whoever wrote that goal. And again, you're going to write an email in order to create dialogue with the school staff member and say something like, hey, I noticed that Hannah met her writing goal early this year. That's such great news. Where do we go from here? And usually one of 2 things will happen. So in the first case scenario, if your child is now writing at grade level, which would be the best case scenario, then that goal will probably be deleted completely because it won't be an area of need anymore for your child to have a goal in. However, if your child is still below grade level in that area, then the goal will be changed or amended, and it will be made more challenging so that your child can continue to make progress with their writing.
And now the third issue that we do see is that sometimes with goals, and that is when a student is not making progress on their IEP goal. So first of all, you should be getting progress reports from the IEP team that report how your child is doing on each of their IEP goals. You should be receiving these progress reports around the same time as you get the report cards, as well as around the time of their annual IEP meeting. The progress report should be measurable. Once again, we need numbers, just like the goals. It's not enough for a progress report to say, Andrew is making great progress on his reading comprehension. No, that is not measurable. I'd like to see it say something like, Andrew is making great progress on his reading comprehension goal by answering questions with 70% accuracy. Now, if Andrew is answering questions with 0% accuracy, then we have a problem. What should you do if this is the situation you come across?
So as you may have noticed by now, you may have noticed a pattern with us both having come from the school system. We're really big on collaboration with the school team. And this all boils down to communication again. So if you see your child is not making progress on a goal, you need to reach out to the person who wrote the goal. You simply need to express concern that progress has not been made. And you can ask, what can we do to help Andrew with his reading? And that could look like the resource specialist is spending more time with Andrew working on his reading. That could be that he or she is changing the intervention program that they're using in order to help Andrew make progress with his reading. But something needs to change with the way that the instruction is being delivered in order for him to make progress. Now, if you have communicated that there is a concern that he is not making progress and you don't see a change being made in order to address that concern, that's when you can reach out to Helene and myself to see about next steps.
The last issue, number 4, you may see is if your child is not making progress on several or all of his IEP goals. And if you, like Sarah said, if you've reached out and are not getting the results you are looking for, this is a big red flag, and it means that something is not working. In this type of situation, you can enlist our help and we can guide you on the next steps. This is the type of situation that if we catch it early enough, it takes a lot less time and investment to fix the issues. However, if this situation drags on too long, we're just afraid that your child is at risk of falling further and further behind. So that concludes our presentation on IEP goals, and we really hope you found this to be helpful and informative, and that you can use these concepts when you analyze your own child's IEP. But to wrap up what we discussed, it's imperative that you understand that the present levels are the foundation for the entire IEP. They need to be detailed and reflect your child's ability as of right now. We also talked about SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, relevant, and timely, and showed you a comparison of what vague goals are versus a SMART goal. And lastly, we gave you examples of issues that could occur and with your child's IEP goals and what to do about them. If there's one thing we want you to take away from our presentation, is to make sure that you understand that the IEP is not just a document. It is a special, individualized legal plan for your child, and you need to make sure you are frequently checking to ensure it aligns with your child's specific needs.
If it is not aligning with their specific needs, please feel free to reach out to us. We know both professionally
and personally.
how overwhelming this process is, and quite frankly, how confusing it can be. This is reviewing just one aspect of the IEP process. Our mission at Empower You Advocacy is to empower our parents to learn to advocate for their own child. We are here to help. Please feel free to visit our website, which is listed right here. You can fill out a simple intake questionnaire and schedule a free 30-minute consultation to discuss any concerns or answer any questions you may have.
But don't forget to fill out our survey for a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And that survey is going to gear us on what is something that you feel our next webinar, our next free webinar, can give you lots of detailed information about. So we will choose one lucky winner, and we will put it and inform them on Friday and inform them on their email address.
And I was going to paste the link for that in the chat. The link